So I don't think that you should get a pass for being offensive to others because of a medical or a self diagnosed behavior, especially if it's a mental health condition, be it chronic or temporary. I think as people, we have a responsibility to hold ourselves to account for how we respond to situations, especially if we are aware of our condition. It is not an excuse to rain on someone else's parade because you're having a bad day. At the same time, I think it's important to hold space and grace for those that we know are dealing with some mental health challenges, while two, holding them accountable. Bottom line, we all have to coexist in this world, and the right to be whomever you are is good until it interferes with the right of another to be at peace as they are. Listen, when you know better, when we know better, we should do better. Okay, I know. That's no way to start a show. So I'm going to start over and I'll be right back. Well, hello, and welcome to In Your Ear Radio. I am your host, Latoya. As always, I'm so excited to be with you. As you know, your presence is my present, and it's just a beautiful, cool, breezy day here. It's not hot. I forget the temperature here in Las Vegas, but it's breezy. We've been getting some cool weather. Rumor has it the temperature's supposed to go up to like 105 next week. I think, it's just a rumor. I just don't see it happening. But let me see what the temperature is while you all are hopping on Facebook and YouTube. And thank you for joining me. And I'm anxious to hear your comments and questions in the chat as we have a very special guest discussing mental health as we close out the month. So 79 degrees, you guys. So don't be shy and share your thoughts and engage us, because that's what we're here for. Shout out to Gemini season. It is Gemini season. That's what's up. Listen, I know we have our thoughts and feelings about Geminis, right? Geminis are cool people. Some of my favorite people are Geminis. One happened to be a sibling, another's a cousin. And, Geminis, you get to know them and you can't help but to love them. So I just want to give a shout out to Geminis. They say they're known for being curious, adaptable, and quick-witted, which I've found that to be true. Gemini, they thrive on communication and they enjoy learning and are often the life of the party. I've seen that. Engagement wise. Geminis are intellectually inclined, constantly gathering and sharing information, and they value both social interaction and both personal growth. And that's according to astrology.com. So they're versatile, flexible, and able to shift between, different roles and interests. And they're often display two contrasting sides to their personality. That's something I think a lot of us would say they have a reputation for. Something like a chameleon, I'd say, right? The quality that helps them to blend. And speaking of two, because they're known for the twos, I've learned that, a Gemini can also be ambidextrous. And I think I'm saying that correct, ambidextrous, which means they use both the left and the right hand equally. And so I happen to know a Gemini who does use both the left and the right hand equally. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Is that a common thing for a Gemini, considered they use both sides of the brain per se? That they would be ambidextrous, if I'm saying that correctly. But that's a rare occasion. It's like 1%. And that means literally using them equally, not just interchangeable or sometimes, but actually equally. So I thought that was interesting. And then I was reading that there are quite a few people, famous people, who have that ability to use both the left and right hand. And I don't know if they use them actually equally, but they are they can use both. For most of us, if we're right-handed, our left hand is our weakness, or if we're left-handed, our right hand is our weakness. But these people like LeBron James, Benjamin Franklin, y'all remember him? Some of y'all might have been around. I'm just joking. Okay, Kobe Bryant, Larry Bird, Kyrie Irving, Candace Parker from the WNBA. Interesting, these people came up as athletes. So I think that's interesting. I wonder if the majority of these rare occurrences of being ambidextrous, if I'm saying it correctly, are people who are in fact athletes, but also, yeah, Albert Einstein, you remember him? So I just thought that was pretty interesting. They also say that dyslexia is common in people who use both hands. And I'm not a Gemini. Sometimes I think I'm dyslexic. I don't know. I just have my moments. You ever just look at a word and think you're spelling it wrong? Like CAN is can, but you're looking at it like, that don't sound right. It don't look right. I don't know if that's dyslexia or reading numbers backwards and things like that. But I that happens to me sometimes. Shout out to E. Carice Entertainment, who's in the YouTube chat. Thank you for joining me. I want to remind you guys, especially here in Nevada, it is early voting. It's very important that we vote. You can vote. It started May 23rd through June 5th. You can vote early and go look up your polling station. You can go to Ballotopia. You can go to the Secretary of State. You can go to nv.gov. You can go to so many different websites to find out where your voting stations are. And you can also register to vote if you're not registered to vote, but you can do so early up until June 5th. And then the official day and the final day to vote will be June 9th here in Nevada. So anyone who's outside of Nevada, please look up your days to vote. I know some states have already voted and brought people into the primaries to move on into the general election in November. But keep that in mind. If you're mailing in your ballot, it needs to be postmarked by June 9th. It has to be postmarked, so do not put it in that blue box because y'all's president and change the rules. Go up to the counter and make sure you get it stamped so that you can make sure it goes out that day or whatever day you're going in before June 9th. If you're sitting in an absentee ballot, the same thing. You want to get it out in the mail by June 9th. Go to the counter, make sure it's stamped. And then if you go on election day, that's fine. If you're not registered in Nevada, you can still register to vote the same day. The thing about it is you'll get a provisional ballot. And what that means is that it won't be counted immediately. It will be soon after the election, but they have to verify your information. And of course, if you're doing it the same day, they won't have time to verify it. So it'll be a provisional ballot that will be counted. And you can always check with your local precinct to verify that it was counted or not. So that's important to know. And since we're talking about voting, before we get into this mental health conversation, I just want to share a story with you, just a brief story about a Black man who was born on this day, May 30th, 1943. His name is James Chaney. And along with civil rights workers Andrew Goodman and Michael Schwerner, they were killed by members of the Ku Klux Klan while participating in Freedom Summer close to Philadelphia, Mississippi. So if you don't know, Freedom Summer is also called Mississippi Summer Project. And it started in June of 1964 to register as many African Americans to vote as possible in the state of Mississippi. And there's a lot of information about it. You can go to the History Channel and read and see videos and documentaries about it. But Angela Lewis, the daughter of the murdered civil rights worker, James Chaney, she sings a song, James Chaney, at his grave in one of the videos, the documentaries that they do. But I just wanted to bring to your attention, the song that she sings, actually, Angela Lewis, is If I Can Help Somebody. And that was written, I think, or produced in 2013. But the point of me bringing this up is just to remind people that don't let anybody tell you that voting is not important, that it doesn't matter, and that it doesn't count, because people kill people to prevent them from voting and registering people to vote. James Chaney, who again died on this day in 1964, was barely 21. He would have been 21 in June of the same year, June 21, which would have made him a Gemini. Okay, I'm telling you, them Geminis, I think, yeah. So I just want to just bring that to your attention. We did miss our After Dark. A lot happened, you guys, and I just want to say, I know a lot of you were looking forward to it, but we'll get back to it. And I just want to shout out everyone who's graduated or celebrating graduation, because a lot of us have kids and family members that are turning up, and that's a beautiful thing. And at the same time, we're also celebrating the life of those who have transitioned. So my heart goes out to anyone who is mourning the passing of anyone at this time. So I just want to bring that out as well, say that as well. But without further ado, because I want to get into this conversation, and I want to hear from you all in the chat with your questions and comments. So please, bring forth that. We have Mr. We have Walter. Look, I'm just being, we have Walter coming back, okay? And he is a therapist who is going to engage us and share his expertise on a lot of topics in reference to mental health. We're definitely going to get into the subject matter that I mentioned and posted as far as autism and being on the spectrum and that nature. So if you guys have watched previously, he's back. His name is Walter Williams. And let me just bring him on stage.
Hey.
And then I have to also give you your applause. So let me do that. So how you doing over there, brother? How you doing?
I'm doing well, doing well. A little foggy. Allergies are kicking in. It's been a bit of a lot of wind, so the allergies are kicking up. So a little
Oh,
foggy
yeah.
again, but I'm here. I'm here though. How are you?
I'm doing well. I was just saying it's just been so much going on in the month of May for me. It's just been compiled. This month, we mourn the loss. This is a month where that my mother passed. My our last baby of the family, I call myself as a bonus mom. Our youngest boy passed.
Okay.
We had other family members pass. I went to a funeral this month. Also been celebrating, graduations, just a lot of family engagement, and so it's been a bittersweet time, good time seeing people I hadn't seen in a long time. And then it's just also reflection of those who I can't see, but they're always in my heart and mind. So it's been a lot.
I can hear that. I can hear that. Sound like a month full of grief and
Yeah.
loss and connection at the same time. So that
Yeah.
helps you up different emotions. So I hear exactly where you're coming from. Bittersweet, I think that's a good way to sum it up for sure.
Yeah. So I'm navigating through that. And always when I'm going through these things, my most important thing for me is to find joy because I
Mm.
choose happiness over everything, right? I try my best not to be down, even though I know it's nothing wrong with, having a moment. It feels much better to be happy and full of joy in the spirit and my energy in my heart. So I try to do fun things. And the fun part is just being around family. So not
Good.
so bad.
Not too bad. Can I ask a question if you don't mind? I know this is an open dialogue. How do you honor the memory of mom during this month?
Well, for me, even before she passed, I was always quoting my mom and talking about my mom. So, do I do anything specifically? No. We sometimes will go to the gravesite, and I do that just, I think, in a way to just be with family. Because for me, in my mind, she's not there, so it's not a thing for me to go there and be like, I'm with her. I don't feel that way. Um, but it's just talking about her and laughing about her and telling stories or maybe cooking something she would enjoy, but mainly just talking and just remember mama this and that. But I've always talked about my mom all the time. So it's not any different for me, but
Yeah.
nothing specific.
No, those are great. I mean, having lost my mom as well, as a teenager, I know that feeling. When the months
Yeah.
come, the birthday or the anniversary in which they pass, how it brings up a lot. But I love what you said, just finding ways to usher her spirit in, right? Playing some music, cooking a meal,
Yeah.
going to memory lane, laughing. I think that's a way to usher in our loved one's spirit
Yeah.
in their physical absence, but we start to feel their spirit, with
Yeah.
us. That warmth, that comfort. So I love that you all do that. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Great way to mourn, a great way to work through grief. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I was just curious. Thanks for sharing. I know that was off script, but I was
I
curious.
know, but you can ask me questions as well because I did want to just have a little Q&A and just kind of chop it up and just
Yeah, let's
just
do
have
it.
a simple conversation. And so I'll ask you the same. Considering that you lost your mama, my condolences. Do we ever get over it? No. It's just people will tell you that you have to get over it or that it gets easier, and I'm just looking like, does it really? Maybe
Yeah,
today it's easier, tomorrow not so much. But what do you
sure.
do? How do you remember your mom?
Yeah, very similar. Very similar. One of the main things I do, I buy a candle that fills my house with an aroma that reminds
Oh,
me of my mom.
mm,
I like candles, and so that's one way that I do. I lost my mom and both my older siblings, so they were the people who grew up with my mom and saw her at a point that I didn't get a chance to. I was 15 when she passed, and she
oh,
was
yeah,
1 at that age. So it's very similar. My sister and I we'll just go down memory lane, share some laughs, some memories, some use some painful moments as moments to laugh at and to bring just to
yeah,
bring ourselves comfort along the way. But the main thing I do is that candle for sure. I would say the second thing I do is music. Sometimes I'll just throw on
yeah,
like different songs that I know she liked that she'll sing to us and kind of get in that vibe. And then the third thing I'll do, I'll go for an evening walk and I'll or morning walk, evening walk, and I'll just speak out loud, right? Be thankful. Um, share out loud the things that's happening that I wish he was a part of. So I
Yeah.
do a variety of different things to comfort myself that during that moment. But you're right, it's nothing that you ever get over, but it's something you
Uh,
learn to live with, and it moves with you
yeah.
as you navigate life. And if you don't believe that nothing is created or destroyed, right? So
Yeah.
though we physically, when we think about the spiritual aspect of it, there's ways to still connect with our people, to still hear that voice, to keep us accountable, right? In those moments that we need some checking and some redirecting.
You're right about that. I do think that no energy, everything stays here. Nothing is destroyed. It's just in a
Hmm.
different form. Because sometimes I forget. I'm like, is she here? Like, is she around me? Like, you kind of,
Mm,
I feel that presence, but it's like in real life, you can't call her and hear her, call you by your nickname and tell
yeah,
you how good the food is and how proud of you she is. But you have those memories in your mind. So,
yeah, yeah. In that voice, that small voice that could be like, that was it. Like, okay, I'm on
yep,
track.
yeah.
I'm on track. Yeah, I love
I'm
that.
grateful for that because I know we all have to go that way. So I just try to have understanding and I try to maintain peace. One of the things that I find joy in, again, that filled my cup, which might seem odd, but I went to go see the Michael Jackson movie. Have you seen that yet?
I have not. I have not. I've heard amazing things though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mixed reviews for some, but I didn't know what to expect because I didn't know if it was just going to be like a documentary, just telling his life story. And then, I heard bits and pieces about, I didn't get enough. They didn't talk about his accusations and, things of that nature. But when I went and they were, showing it from the kid, how they were rehearsing in the living room and just the giraffe that he got at the house. I forgot all about the giraffe. It
Okay.
really gave me a lot of joy just hearing the songs and the music. And so I think if you're looking for something to cheer you up, I think that it'll bring you some cheer. And so I encourage people to go see it. One of the controversies of that I wanted to mention is, and this is just me, just being the intellectual, analytical, pick apart person I am sometimes,
Okay.
is people found their issues with it or whatnot. Like I said, some people wanted to hear more about the accusations against him, and there was reason why that wasn't presented because of, I guess what do they call it, the NDA or whatnot.
Hmm.
But there was a part in there where they were talking about MTV and how they forced MTV to start showing his videos. And Michael Jackson's video was the spearhead of all black, a lot of other black entertainers having their platform on MTV. And I was listening to a man who was an executive. I can't remember his name, but it was in an interview, who worked for BET back in the day. And we know BET was, our thing. Growing up, we didn't have access to a lot of our black entertainers by way of TV. So
Hmm.
people be surprised why we know so much white people music, because that's kind of like what we were exposed to more so. But BT was a jam, right? We had everything. And so he was just talking about it. And one of his takeaways was that they never mentioned BET. And I thought about that in the sense of a quote that Joe Madison, the late great Joe Madison, used to say, that in America, we are culturally conditioned to believe that white is superior and black is inferior. And the manifestation of that is that black people are undervalued, underestimated, and marginalized. And I say that because they bigged up the fact that we got onto MTV, which was a white production, right? Nothing wrong with it. That was a pop huge platform. So I understand why that was a big deal, but no mention of the black platform that you didn't have to fight to be on. And so that was something I thought about. And I was like, wow, we left that out. We left that out.
Yeah, I can hear that. I can hear that, and I've heard most of the reviews I've heard have been pretty stellar. But I think that's a very good point that putting emphasis on what we've had to work hard for. The barriers we have to break through versus the ones that were already afforded to us or that have been positioned for us to have a platform, if you will.
Yeah.
But I'd imagine it would have certainly been nice to give BET that shout out. I also think some people have lost. And it's just my opinion. Some of the energy and momentum behind BET, when there was a selling of the company
Mm,
of that sort. So I think sometimes people have their personal vendettas that come up that prevent them from being able to speak about certain things. And again, that's just me assuming here, not knowing the full spectrum there.
yeah.
But it would have been nice to shout out BET. But if you know, right?
Yeah.
BET has been a household name, continue to be a household name for many,
Yeah.
many people. But the upbringing, right? The exposure, the music videos, the news, the
Yeah.
culture. Yeah, I think that's how we've learned how to get our swag right with BET.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
So if you're looking for a little joy, that's something that's fun. I want to give a shout out to Tiffany on Facebook. Thank you for joining us in the chat. Nukinda on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us in the chat. And Pieces of Chi on Pieces of Chi. Chi is good too, right? Chi. Do you talk about Chi as a therapist and counselor? Do you speak to those things?
Not much, not much.
No.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
Pieces of Chi on YouTube. And I see my sister also on Facebook. Hi, Marquella. Thank you for joining me.
yeah. Hey,
But yeah,
y'all.
so we're at the heels of Mental Health Awareness Month. We're at the end of it, closing on it. I know the last time we talked, we tried to, center Black men, which I think is very important because they don't get the attention that they need. And our brothers, almost a taboo conversation, especially for our men, because it's like we don't want to go talk to no therapist. We don't want to tell our business to people. And so I really wanted to just make the platform available, presented by way of a Black male, giving his perspective and hopefully helping them to be more comfortable with knowing what's out there as far as resources and that they're not alone in whatever they're going through. So
For sure, for sure. Yeah,
yeah,
it's the mental health month, mental health awareness month, and yes, we had some great dialogue around our Black men, and I've actually
yeah,
done some busy work, been a little busy this month, speaking to that in some private spaces.
yeah,
But Black men aren't the only ones. I think we all need to tend to our mental health, and I think the more we just spend time, really just spend time with ourselves, learning ourselves, bettering
yeah,
ourselves, improving ourselves, healing with ourselves, healing from ourselves. I think it helps us to be better overall. But that requires us to turn our lens from outward to inward, and that's very hard for a lot of us to do because it's always easy for me to put you under the microscope and judge you and question you and ridicule you and get caught up in what you got going on and neglect what I got going on, right? Which feeds into a lot of the biases many of us have. But if we can cut out minding other people's business and pay the own business that mine does, which is
okay,
our own.
right,
I think we learn a lot about ourselves, but I think a lot of people are afraid to sit with themselves because of what comes up. When you really
yeah,
sit down and start to peel back the layers of your own thinking process, your own behavior, it can be scary, right? And you
yeah,
can be, ashamed of yourself for behaving or thinking the way that it is. But until you address that, I don't know if we will ever get the full healing experience, if you will.
mhm.
That I believe people have the potential to do. But yeah, that's just my thoughts. That's listening to what you're saying there.
I hear you. And when you say for a healing experience, one of my questions I had written down is: do you think that people can actually be 100% fully healed in anything across the board?
I don't think so. I don't think so. And here's my reason why. Because you remember the wounds, you remember the mark. It's not something that you just forget. I think, and sometimes you can look at a scar and remember when somebody did
Mm,
whatever, and it can bring back those feelings. Right? Mother's Day month, the death of mom, birthday of mom, or whatever the case may be. It can bring up, those feelings, those thoughts
yeah,
as if it just happened in that moment.
yeah,
So I don't know if healing is a destination, but it's more of a journey where
yeah,
as you move along in life and change your perspective, invite new ideas in, change your behavior, find better ways to cope with losing loved ones, transitioning jobs, or whatever the case may be. I think that's when healing starts to happen.
yeah,
Just kind of picking on the topic of losing our parent, our mother. Um, you know, I can just sit for a second and remember the moment the police rung the doorbell 100 times and asked me to come downstairs to go to the hospital. I can remember like it was yesterday, and I'm
yeah,
like, in the exact same feeling I had, heart get to beating fast, breath gets short, all of those things, right? So to your question, no, I don't think healing is a destination, it's certainly a journey. And I think it's unrealistic to think that it is. And I think if we can be mindful that it takes effort and continue work daily to move along. And I think if you can make that progress, you then find yourself in a more healed state where you can
yeah.
talk about things in a way that you probably can talk about before.
Yeah, I agree. You were kind of in my head because I thought about that when I was asking the question, trying to answer it for myself. And I thought the same thing that you can maybe never heal. Because, like you said, a wound can heal, but then all it takes is you to look at it, or maybe you bump it and the scar opens back up. And it's always something that's going to trigger you and bring you back to that moment. Not that it's a negative thing, but as long as you're aware of it, you can work through it and push through it. And I think if people can at least acknowledge their feelings when they experience certain things, see certain things, then they can get through it easier and not cause, harm to others as well. Because a lot of times that happens when we just react and nobody knows what we're reacting to. It may have nothing to do with them, but you're having a moment and now you just triggered me and it's on.
Mhm. No, that's it. That's it. And when we react, it comes from a place of impulsivity and not
Yeah.
a, it's the difference between reacting and responding. And if we can respond, I think it slows us down to where we can be intentional and careful with what we say and how we say it versus, being impulsive and cause harm to the other people. And unfortunately, I think that that's a lot of times what happened. Even thinking about us men who don't have we haven't been taught or have cultivated the language to express how we feel. I think
Yeah.
we start to mask it in anger. We start to mask it with sex. We mask it with drinking,
Yeah.
whatever the vice is to be in denial of what we're really going through. And a lot of times we often are in denial. How you doing? I'm good. Are
Yep.
you really? You know what I'm saying? Like the economy kicking my butt, it ain't kicking yours, or whatever the case may be, right? I think it allows us to I think what you said is spot on, just having having that awareness, that self-awareness. But many of us are in denial. And
Yeah. And
yeah, and when we do
not like
that,
Moses, though. We're not in denial like the Moses. You don't know. I'm going to crack a joke because that's just my personality.
no, I love
But what you were saying in reference to and me playing around, I'm losing my train of thought. But what was it exactly? I'll come back to it. But I'll mention in the chat, we have Tiffany who wants us to touch on the Netflix, I guess, as we were talking about me watching the Michael Jackson movie. She wants to know if we can talk about that as far as mental health. And did you get a chance to watch that? The Netflix special, The Roast with
it.
Kevin Hart?
No, I haven't. I haven't. I've seen some things on my news feed about some backlash, but I'm not fully rehearsed on the situation.
Yeah.
But fill
And I
me in
didn't.
with the inside.
Yeah, I didn't watch it either. She said she refused to watch it, but she did watch The Breakfast Club for like 20 minutes. As I know he recently did an interview. Some of the pushback he had, because one of the main things that was triggering for me is that they allow some white man to get up and make a joke about a black man who was killed by a police officer, George Floyd. And I don't understand that. Like, to me, I understand comedy, they're all bets are off. Like, I understand we most comedians, it's laughing at their pain, right? There are people who are dealing with trauma, and this is the way that's their therapeutic way of dealing with trauma. And I can understand that, but where's the line? And in that respect, would it have been okay, when I thought about that, they're making a joke about George Floyd? Would Kevin Hart would have been okay if that would have been someone, a direct family member of his? Would they been able to get up and do that? And even thinking about that, Cheryl Underwood, they made a joke about her husband. He probably took his own life or died by suicide because of her looks, things like that. It was just very distasteful. And
Okay.
I don't know, maybe something going on with them. Unhealed people, hurt people, right?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and I think we, as you said, we try to laugh at our pain, and I think we mask behind the hurt or the shame or the embarrassment, and I think we can be quite insensitive, in the name of humor, in the name of comedy, right? I think we can come off very insensitive to those who are dealing with that stuff every single day that we don't even see, right? I mean, the aftermath and the fallout, even COVID, for example, like
Mhm.
we're still experiencing it, we're still in it, and we haven't really grieved it. We
Yeah.
just went back to what it was times 10. So
Mhm.
it becomes something that I think a lot of folks don't slow down and really think about the impact, that
Yeah.
intent versus impact, right? That's a big difference. It may have
Yeah.
intended to be comical, lighthearted, funny, but the
Yeah.
impact, I think that's what we have to think about. So
Right.
I think before we be reactive, or think things are just, easy to just slide in there, we have to consider both sides.
Mhm.
Where's my intention with what I'm about to say, and will it have the impact that I hope or that is intended to have? And
Yeah.
it sounds like with that type of joke, the impact is definitely not probably what they intended.
And it was mixed reviews about that as far as impact. The pushback was, for one, yeah, now we're talking about it again. And why people being so upset, it puts it back out there how we're not healed from that. Like, we are still upset. This is still an issue. and no, we don't appreciate it. So if you try to take the high road or look at the positive or the important thing that might have been surfaced, it was that we're letting the people know that as a whole, as a majority, we don't like that. We still don't like knees on our neck, and we don't, it's just, it's a lot for us to deal with, and the trauma is still there. So I guess there's
Yeah.
some takeaways. And the piggyback, you want to say your thought? I just thought about what I was going to say to you. You were mentioning, Black men and how they camouflage their feelings, and they, maybe they respond to their feelings by drinking or other things, sex. I also know from our previous interview that you also do a lot of counseling and therapy with men that are a part of a domestic violence environment. And so I think that might be another thing to add to that, their feelings might come out in a way of abuse or being abused, right?
Yeah. That's exactly it. The two main components with violence and intimate partner relationship is power and control. And when we're trying to assert a level of power or dominance over someone else, it puts us in this hierarchy standpoint, where I'm over you, or you do as I say, do as you're told, things of that sort. And a lot of times for us men, it comes from growing up in environments where we couldn't control, where we didn't have control. A lot of it is rooted in wounds from our parents, from abuse we've endured. And, we make a vow, this is never going to happen to me again. But what happens, unfortunately, we then perpetuate that onto someone else. It's not going to happen to me, but I'm going to do it to somebody else.
Yeah.
Doesn't make it right. So I do a lot of work of just unraveling and pulling back the layers to where the root of the thought process, because, we just don't act. There's a thought behind every action. And that's where I really focus a lot of my work with the men. Like, what's the belief system, the theology behind why you think it's important to, call your partner out of name, to put your hands on her, to belittle her, etc. But before we even get there, they got to understand what violence is. And I think a lot of, as of late, a few of the men that I've been working with, they come in during my assessment. I didn't hit her, but when we start talking about the different forms of violence, I think physical violence is only one, but we're talking emotional. What about the emotional abuse, the psychological, economic abuse, right? Using children as a form of manipulation and control. I'm using sex as a form of manipulation and control, right? Intimidation. These subtle things that we don't think about that comes off as a violent, but again, it's not seen, but it's felt. It becomes a process. And Carter G. Woodson said, right, you control a person's thinking, you don't have to worry about their actions. So if I can begin to psychologically, play on your head with gaslighting you, threatening you, if you leave me, I'm gonna kill myself, or if you do this, I'm gonna do that, right? It starts to get a person to lock in a little bit more, or to stay longer than what they may need. But it becomes forms of manipulation. It's a manipulation tactic, right? Again, power and control. So for those who aren't familiar with the forms of violence, it's more than just physical. It's more than just physical. And that's something I had to learn too as a man, right? My male privilege didn't allow me to understand the multiple layers of violence. Because I've never been physically harmful to a woman. When I think the time that I lied to get what I wanted, I'm like, oh, okay, I was manipulation. Yeah, I was being coercive, right? So once we just start to understand that, it allows us to then correct those behaviors and choose to not perpetuate it. But it's certainly some of the difficult work, because I don't believe, what people do equates to who they are. And I really try to distinguish that with the men I work with. But once we get into that behavior, the shifts that they have, the mindset, ideas that they begin to catch on to disrupt violence in their lives, is phenomenal. It's really phenomenal. But it's some good work.
Yeah, I was looking for the specific word. I discussed it before, but brain fog is real. But I want to say it starts with the letter P, but it was on the heels of discussing I think it was a lieutenant governor in DC or Maryland that had took his wife's life, and then his and it was a term that was trending that described exactly what you're saying when it comes to men and abuse and all of those things, financial control, mental, physical, just all of those things. And it could go either way. So it's not to just, pile up on men, but it is a reality. It's more predominant from men, and it's received by women. And it's also something that's part of religion too. I see it baked into religion. And so when you're saying how it's their upbringing or a thought process, there are some people who are part of a religion who have been taught that you need to discipline or be in control of your spouse, So I get it 100%.
Yeah, yeah, and to that point, that's why we get into the belief system, right?
Yes, yes.
Where do these thoughts come from, right? What do they start? Like how? Because it goes into our subconscious mind, right? When we think about the different types of parts of the brain, the subconscious, it only receives. It just receives. And if
Yeah.
you hit a single message over and over and over, you start to believe it, whether it's
Mhm.
true or not. So if you
Yeah.
are part of something that like a religion, right, that you have a certain reference and affirmation for if somebody with that level of authority began to say these messages, you start to think that it's true. And then when we break that down, we start to realize a lot of these belief systems are faulty, and we have to throw out a lot of the ones that we thought was true and develop some new ones, some healthy ones, based on what we know to be true when it comes to healthy relationship dynamics.
Yes. So again, on the heels of Mental Health Awareness Month, as we're closing it out, I wanted to highlight a specific mental health condition that is becoming even more common. I don't know if it's more common or more people are speaking about it. And so that was, being on the spectrum and autism. And I wanted to kind of get into this conversation and get an understanding. Is it the same thing? What is it? Just get into all of the aspects of, how you get diagnosed, and is it something in the foods that's causing everybody to more people for this to be more common? So starting there, I just want to know what is autism versus being on the spectrum? Is there a difference?
No, there's no difference. It is the autism spectrum disorder, right? And it's a spectrum because not one person who's diagnosed with autism is the same as the other, right? Like with twins, they may look alike, but they're not the same. They look alike, but they're not the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
The autism spectrum, and yeah, because you have some high functioning, low functioning, but how do I want to? I'll put it this way: autism spectrum disorder is a newer development disorder condition, right? I think sometimes people think it's something that people just something's in the food or just behaviorally that something is off, but it's a newer developmental condition that affects how a person communicates. It affects how they interact socially. It affects how they process information and really experience the world around them, right? So this can be viewed as you may make a joke and I may not respond in the way that you think I
Mm-hmm.
should respond, right? And you may think I'm being rude. You may think I'm being not as engaging, but it
Yeah.
could be a neural developmental condition that's preventing me from understanding or processing what it is that you're trying to say, or that it's a joke, right?
Yeah.
So it's not a mental illness, and I think sometimes people assume that it's a mental illness or a mental disorder when we talk about like psychosis, like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, borderline personality disorder, disorders of that sort. That's different from autism spectrum. So it's a developmental condition that causes it to be different. Excuse me, from other severe mental health disorders like as I mentioned, bipolar, schizophrenia, etc. Does that
And
make
so,
sense?
yes, but are you describing being on the spectrum? Is that the category that you put those characteristics in, being on the spectrum?
Yeah, so when we talk about being on the spectrum, right, you have individuals who need a bit more higher level of support. Do you have
Mm-hmm.
some who have more lower level type support? And I'm struggling with the language. They just starting to change the language. Usually we call
Yeah.
it low functioning and high functioning,
Yeah.
right? But they're switching it where higher functioning or higher support needs. These are the individuals who may have communication challenges. They use fewer words, maybe nonverbal. They may require assistance in their daily
Yeah.
activities, bathing, cleaning, cooking, things of that sort. They may experience intense sensory, so loud noise, right? So you may see people with headphones
I
on.
start speaking on you. I listen.
Yeah, because things are loud. They may not want to be touched, right? So, you may see some individuals grabbing themselves of this sort. You may see, individuals fidgeting with their hands, because it's a sensory thing, right?
Mhm.
But on the lower support needs, right? You have those are the individuals who can fly under the radar. You may not notice, right? They may still struggle with social cues, right? They may struggle with relationships, being flexible and accommodating. They may struggle speaking fluidly, but a lot of
Mhm.
times they can manage themselves. They can take care of themselves for the most part. Can be in environment and
Yeah.
community, and not be easily recognized as someone that's has autism. And I would say now, because I think there was a lot of misconceptions around it. People are taking it more serious, and are going through the process to be assessed and evaluated, because quite frankly, a lot of men have autism and don't even know it. Right? When we think about
Wow.
lack of empathy, social cues, some compassion, right? It's something neurological that's happening there that we may not know, and because we haven't did the right assessments and went through the right process to try to understand that. But usually you will go through someone who's PhD, who's trained to do, neuro assessments to understand what's going on in the brain, and how it's
Okay.
impacting how one show up in their day-to-day life. Hopefully that answers it. What
So
else?
just for my own understanding, and you guys, if you are struggling with understanding or have questions, feel free. This is your opportunity now to ask questions in the chat.
Yeah,
Um,
please.
so just correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I'm hearing you say is that under the umbrella of being on the spectrum, that includes different degrees of autism,
Hmm.
neurodivergence.
Hmm.
Is that something? And what is the other one? There was another thing. But I mean, because I'm hearing people now just call themselves on the spectrum of being neurodivergent. I'm sure you guys remember one of the common something that was trending a lot with Amanda Sills. If you're not familiar with who she is, she's a comedian, actress, and she announced on social media a while back when she was on Shannon Sharp's Club Shay Shay that she was on the autism spectrum, and she said that that she hadn't been diagnosed by a doctor. She said it was too expensive to go through the process of being clinically diagnosed, but she explained that the autism spectrum disorder, which she is ASD, is a developmental disability where many have differences in brain function, social communication, repetitive behaviors, and just pretty much everything that you're saying. And she put herself under the umbrella. She classified herself as neurodivergent, meaning her brain functions differently from neurotypical norm. And I've heard other people say that too, that they're neurodivergent. Is that considered a mental health condition? And is she proper in diagnosing herself by going to Dr. Google, which I imagine, somewhere along the line, that's where she came up with that conclusion?
Yeah, one, I would highly recommend that people do not diagnose themselves, because, quite frankly, we can open up the DSM-5 and we can find something in each of the disorders that we can say, "Yep, that's me," all day long, right?
Yeah.
Overthinking, sleeping too much, thinking so fast, not being able to focus on a task for an extended period of time, all of these things, right? So no, I don't recommend that individuals use web searches to diagnose themselves. I highly recommend going to a professional, and to consult with your provider. It's not to say that it doesn't come with a cost, but if you have insurance, that helps to cover it. But there are some people who are specialized and may not use insurance, but there are a ton of programs and community resources to help individuals really go through the proper channels to be, officially diagnosed and assess and diagnose. So that's I highly recommend it. Otherwise, you are you you'll drive yourself insane, right? You'll start to think you have all of these conditions, and what can happen is we can have confirmation bias, right? We can read something, and the moment we sneeze, we can be like, I knew I had it. It's like, it was just
Tourette.
allergy.
I got mental Tourette because I don't say it out loud, but I'm thinking, random
Yeah,
stuff in my head.
yeah. That's it. That's it. But as far as so no, I don't think one should diagnose himself. Two, when we think about neurodivergence, I mean, that covers a variety of things, right? Just how we process, how we think, how we behave. I think the big thing now is attention deficit ADHD, right? And many people are self-diagnosing as ADHD, really because it's just hard to focus on one thing at a time. Why? Because you got everything competing for your attention at the same time, right? email, text messages, you're on a video chat, you're trying to check the comments, you got something on the stove, cooking at the same time. So we got all of these things that's competing for our attention. And then we have, devices that would you like to be notified of your email, of Facebook, of Instagram, of Snapchat, of somebody at your door? Like, so you got all of these things that's fighting for your attention. So it does become hard for us to focus. And when we're constantly engaging in vices that keeps our attention from being elongated, but very quick, 30-second videos, 5-second videos, these things that we just get a quick hit and we move on, right? We start to recondition our brain, rewire our brain to only deal with things in short amounts of time. But neurodivergent is a variety of ways in which that shows up for different people. So I don't think I'm able to specifically say what one thing is, because it just looks different in everybody.
It's a lot, because it seems like if we're not, whatever normal is, I guess normal would be somebody who doesn't say mean things or laughs, or a normal person laughs when someone tells a joke. Maybe they don't think it's funny, or doesn't feel sad about certain things. For me, I could watch a horror movie and my body feels the pain of whatever's happening to that person, the blood. And I think they call it a sharer or something. I don't know. I've been reading Earthseed, Parable of the Sword, so now I'm diagnosing myself. I'm a sharer. But it's just so many things. Like what is really normal? And then when you talk about the technology aspect, like, should we be classified as that under a mental health issue? I mean, I guess it is per se, but it's not something. To me, it's just something that developed based on us having so much access to so many things, So if we take that away, we can cure ourselves or heal ourselves or whatever the situation is. I don't know. It's a lot. And even the people who are creating all of this technology, do you know they don't allow this in their home? They don't allow their kids to have cell phones and all these access to social media and the internet in a way that they sell to the public, to the masses. But yeah, like, what is normal? Like, why do we need a title for things that may seem abnormal? Again, not laughing at a joke or just being fidgety or being sensitive to noise. Like, if people chew while they eat, that's a problem. Maybe call it perimenopause. But why does it need a name?
Yeah, and I think that's what's happening. I mean, many of us are finally having the vocabulary to describe what we're experiencing, ways that we felt for a long time. And, with social media, it only takes a few people to get things to become a trend, or for it to become a buzzword. So it's and again, that bias, right? When we hear something that we think is true about us, we're like, that's it. But you got to do your due diligence, and I think it's good to get multiple opinions. Same with a doctor, right? If you get diagnosed with some type of illness, it's recommended that you go get a second and even third opinion, because we're still human at the end of the day. But when we think about neurodivergence, I mean, it's just the natural differences in how all of our brains process information, learn, communicate, focus, and experience the world as that individual. And if we were to just put a blanket state, I mean, we could almost say we all are neurodivergent in some way, because I don't think how you think, and you don't think how I think. That's what makes us unique, and that's what allows us to come together and have a great conversation, because my perspective and your perspective allow us to create a bigger perspective. And it doesn't mean one have to agree with it. It's just our opinion. It's just the way we think and how we see the world from that view. So it's good to engage with people with a variety of different opinions, and then you draw the conclusion for yourself, based on what you know and what you feel in your heart of heart to be true.
Yeah. So Tiffany's asking about type A and type B neurodivergence, which I'm not familiar with at all. Is there a difference? Is one worse than the other, or?
I would say like one is worse than the other. I'll say you kind of got your type A and type B personalities, type alpha males or alpha woman personalities, right? So when we think about type A, it's more like folks who are maybe a bit more competitive, time cautious. They may be a bit impatient when it comes to certain things. Excuse me, they're more prone to certain stress. They're really driven by like achievements and accolades, Whereas a type B, right? But think alpha male, right? Somebody who wants to be the life
Got
of
it.
the party, the loudest one in the room,
Hmm.
and I'm using alpha male, but it could be alpha female too.
Yeah.
And type B is they're more chill, more relaxed, and that's competitive, right? I'll compete, but if I win, great. If I don't, no big deal. A little bit more patient, more laid back, easy going when it comes to certain things. Probably someone type A would be less reactive, you know.
Hmm.
They don't have to be seen or heard, but as long as they're in the room, they satisfied. So I'm sure we can start to think about people in our personal lives who are type A and type B. People who just want to have all the attention, and people who like, I'm cool in the background. Again, we all have these people in our lives, and we have those traits ourselves. Again, it becomes easier to see it in other people than in ourselves.
And those terminologies sound less clinical to me because when you talk about type A, type B personality, I don't think about mental health. I don't think about probably medication or therapy or treatment. I just think about we just come into the world, we have our lived experiences that we respond to things differently. And
Mhm.
that is what it is. And that's fair enough. Just even in
Absolutely.
my opening, one of the things I said is we can be who we are, except when our behavior crosses over into causing harm to
Mhm.
another, then it's time to check ourselves. And so that's how I look at life. But I know some things are not controllable. Some things need medication. Some things do need therapy and counseling and just training and development to be able to maintain. So where's that line when you look at someone and you're going, oh, they're not acting normal. This is more than a type A, type B personality. This is outside of the neurodivergent type of behavior. When do you look at a person and say, maybe you need therapy or maybe you should go see a doctor? And which one do you do first? Like a medical doctor is what I'm saying, or a therapist?
Mhm. I think it depends, but I think first and foremost we gotta land on the fact that we all human. We're human
Okay.
beings, and when we recognize that, regardless of how a person is behaving, what they may be appearing to do, that may come off as weird or different, abnormal. I think if we first just see them as a person, see them as a human, I think it one allows us to breathe, right? Because you behave differently from me doesn't mean you deserve to be treated less than, right? Or
Yeah.
because you have some type of diagnosis or disorder doesn't mean you're should be treated differently from how I'm treated, right? Now
Yeah.
there may need to be some adjustments to the environment, if thinking about autism spectrum, if sensitivity to the light bothers me, right? If I come into your home and you dim the lights, right? That's you just honoring my humanity. Like I just need some dim lights when I come in your
Yeah.
crib. That's okay, right? But when we talk about these disorders or diagnosis, I think it's important to remember like that we're talking about human beings and not a diagnosis, right? I think the diagnosis just gives us language to describe what one is experiencing. I mean, then allows us to then do something about it, right? Like you said, we can't name it until we tame it. Same when we talk about
Yeah.
men emotions,
Yeah.
like until we can name it and call it for what it is, then we can start to do something about it. But autism, for example, is just a different way of experiencing and interacting with the world. As many of our experiences are. We was talking about the loss of our moms, and though we can relate on that, but we experience it differently. I light a candle, fill my house. I'm finna go cook up something. I'm finna go do these other things, but it's still honoring loved
Yeah.
ones that we still hold dear to our heart. But to the second part, you could do one of two. I think a lot of times starting with your health doctor, your primary care physician, because usually they have a questionnaire, like a PHQ, your personal health questionnaire to understand what's going on, right? Are you
Yeah.
sleeping? Are you eating? Are you eating too much, eating too
Okay.
little? Are you socially active? And that usually can give some insight that maybe you having some symptoms of depression or anxiety or something that's going on. Usually they
Yeah.
can say, hey, based on how you scored or based on the information you share, we recommend that you go see a therapist, things like that. I've gotten calls from hospitals, social workers who work at hospitals. Hey, I have this client here who can use a therapist, right? And they became referred through their primary care physician. But the other route is okay too. Even if there isn't an issue, I think it's cool to just chop it up with somebody that
Yeah.
holds a space for oneself because, we oftentimes don't want to put a lot of weight on the people we love, our partners, our families, or they put a lot of weight on us and then
Hmm.
we don't have anybody to dump. So just having a confidential space like a therapist, who's licensed, right? A therapist who's certified, and there's ways to go through all of that to make sure that who you're talking to is legit. to make sure you're talking to somebody who's been trained to meet you and engage with you where you are. Just how if you were dating, you do your detective work and your research. I think you should do the same. When you're looking at providers that you may work with.
Yeah, times are different now when it comes to dating. I'm so glad I don't have to deal with that because yeah, people can find out a lot about a person. To me, there's a one thing to do research, and then there's another thing to just like get into all a person's business. Like I guess you got to better to be safe than sorry, but it's a lot. But I like the way that you emphasize that you want to go to someone who's licensed, which is important, and that's just on the heels of what's been trending. If you haven't heard about it, you've probably been sleeping under a rock. But there's this lady who calls herself Dr. Cheyenne Bryant, who came on. I think the straw that broke the camel's back, or what spearheaded this, was her on a Joe Budden interview. If I think that's where it started at, where she was saying that she didn't think licensing was necessary when it came to therapy and counseling. And she said that you only really need that so that you can build, right, a person. And I mean, there was a lot of talk about it. It was a lot of pushback. Now, everyone that I spoke to that was actually licensed in this field were disgusted by what she said. They were like, that is the wrong information. It was kind of like horrified because there's so much that comes along with having that license. There's a reason why you have to have, the education to, you're going to diagnose people and give them medicine and things of that nature. You want to have an education in what you're, describing or whatnot. And then there was the other side, which I didn't hear from anyone who had letters in front of their name. But it was like Dr. Umar and of course Amanda Seales. She kind of supported her in her endeavors to consider herself a doctor on the therapeutic level of counseling and getting people through, I guess, whatever mental health conditions they were going through. I don't support it. That's just my point of view. But what do you think about that? Have you been following her in that story?
I sleep on the rocks, Latoya.
Oh, I can tell. You mentioned TV shows. I'm not mad at you because that's how you
Yeah,
make.
yeah. It was actually, I was meeting with a client who I do some work with, some coaching work with, and she brought it to my attention. She was like, "Have you
Okay.
heard?" I'm like, "No." So she the one that put me on game
Okay.
about it, and I had to go do my research to kind of catch up because I'm mindful of how much I consume of certain things to
Yes.
protect my joy. To your point, um, but to the topic that is that's a yeah, that's a no for our field. That's a no for our field. And the reason why is because we take a obligation, right? We go through ethics training to do no harm to our clients. We go through a rigorous, course programs, training hours, supervision, all of these things to be qualified to sit for someone and help them work through their day-to-day
Mhm.
issues. So I think for people who actually go through the process to obtain a license, it's like a disrespect. It's like,
Yeah.
I worked hard for this. Like you just self-proclaim. Like how dare you? So I can see how licensed folks will feel some type of way. But I don't know. So that's one self-proclaiming to be a title that you're not. I think is very dangerous, and I think it sends the wrong message to people who may really want to tap in and get some support from people who are licensed and trained. Now, that's not to say that some of us who are licensed and trained are all great at what we do, right? Because sometimes
Okay.
we can go through the schooling, go through the training, and still suck as clinicians or as providers, right? I've heard some
Mhm.
horror stories of things that some clients that I will be meeting with have experienced with providers. I'm like, they said what? They did what? But unfortunately that happens, but to those who go through the work and actually hold the space and very protective of the space and the work that we do, because we are in charge of supporting someone's life. We're told to do no harm, to do good, to do right by folks. And so I think when folks come and do things like that, it's a poke at the integrity of the work that we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really like that. And a lot of some of the key things that I respect about you, just in our prior interview and just even now, is one of the things when you were mentioning that you were licensed in Arizona, but as far as doing therapy outside of the state, you could do life coaching instead. Am I correct in that?
Yeah. So you can use a
And
code.
that's because there are certain requirements per state as far as, certifications, right?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
so I think that's important because you were transparent with that, different from this woman who calls her Dr. Cheyenne. And I like the fact, touching on the fact that you were saying that all therapists and counselors are created equal. You mentioned in our last conversation how some are biased. Some people come in with a bias, be it racial, be it, whatever biases they may have. It's a natural or human thing. And that's something to consider. And again, that all therapists and counselors aren't created equal. So I appreciate that about you, because a lot of times we go into, even just with a medical doctor or even a therapist, sometimes there's a lot of arrogance. They feel like because they have a letter in front of their name and they have the education that you can't question them. You just do
Absolutely.
as I'm telling you because I know better. And so I can
Absolutely.
respect that.
Yeah. No, you spot on it, and thank you for acknowledging that. That during my intake assessments with my clients, that's one of the things I say up front. After I let them know about confidentiality, I say, hey, I may not be the right person for you. You might not
Yeah,
like my style. You may not like how I approach things, and that's okay. But give me that feedback, and
mhm,
my obligation, right? Thinking about ethics, my obligation as a provider is to make sure you're connected with someone else who can potentially support you
yeah,
and meet you where you are. Otherwise, I'm causing you harm and I'm
yeah,
just dragging you along so that I can just bill health, insurance and get paid. And
yeah,
yeah, if you own your practice and you billing, owning the business, yes, you want to bill so you can get paid, of course. But it's deeper than the money. It's way deeper than the money, right? When you can see someone's life is transformed, or when you can be the voice that keeps someone from taking their own life, right? Think about the
mm,
power that had. Like, think about that. Like the authority you have, the position you're in to say, hey, like
yeah,
your life is worthy, and
yeah,
you get someone who understands. But I do think providers should be very transparent. I may not be the perfect fit for you, and that's okay. I'm not
yeah,
for everybody, and everybody's not for me. But I will ensure that you get connected with somebody who can support you and meet your needs. I mean, I will also say I see someone put in a comment that evidence based practice versus opinion. That's spot on. And
yeah,
as clinicians, as licensed, we have to get training hours every year to uphold our license and our credentials. And they might not ask for your training hours every year or every other year when you have to renew your license, but you can be audited. Prove to me that you're staying up to date with the latest research. Prove to me that you're on top of your game when it comes to ethics and things of that sort, so that we're not doing or causing harm to clients. People's opinion, I think that's where coaching starts to kind of go left, because now everybody can be a coach. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
you go
I agree.
hit your toe and heal it. Now I can coach you on how to heal your toe if you hit it. It's
Yeah,
like it's a little bit deeper than that. Even that, right? I think it's important that people do their research and don't be afraid to ask for. Let me see your credentials. Let me get a couple of references, right? So people who can speak to your experience and what you've done. If you for sure legit in what you do, you'll be able to provide that um, with no problem.
yeah, and I agree because I have friends. As you get older, you start to talk about things that you wouldn't necessarily talk to when you're younger. Like we talk about, well, who's your favorite doctor? Who do you go see? What dentist do you go to, or things of that nature. And I have friends who refer their therapist. And you can respect their opinion because a lot of times if they think enough to refer them, it's because they sat with them and they've had a good experience, and so that's important too. But yeah, I do agree. When it comes to your opinion versus having, evidence practice, there's a big difference. And then even when you talk about, life coaching, because you have people, I hear some of these life coaches about high value, even with Dr. Cheyenne Bryant, she has mentioned she speaks a lot to relationships. So you hear the high value things. And to me, that's offensive to call somebody high value and low value, first of all, when you're talking about
Mm,
humans in
okay.
respect to what they can bring into a relationship. I don't know. To me, I get turned off from that. So I do think, yeah, when it's opinion based, it can, it's kind of like confirmation bias. People that will go to a life coach is with that type of life coach are probably gravitating towards someone who's already affirming what they believe about themselves. I don't know. But what does life coach? What's the difference with life coach versus actual therapy and counseling?
Yeah, I think therapy, as we're talking, somebody who's licensed, someone who's trained, someone who is being supervised, or a part of groups that can hold accountability, for
Yeah,
us, because we do have biases. We all have biases, right? Everybody.
Mhm.
We just may not recognize what those biases are. So when we're collaborating with other clinicians about a case, hey, I'm dealing with this person, who's presenting this and sharing that. Here's what my approach was. That a good approach? Or here's the modality that I drew from to help support them in that need. Was that good? And they can say, that probably wasn't the best one. Have you considered this one? Right? Where now you have somebody that can help hold you accountable and help
Yeah.
the integrity of the work that you do. So that's therapy.
Yeah.
There's licensing and there's gatekeepers, if you will, right, along the way, that allows us to keep operating the work that we do. When it comes to coaching, I mean, I think that's just self-proclaimed. Again, something that people, if you have lived experience of some sort, I mean, you have coaching for almost any and everything. And quite frankly, I think with AI being what it is, I think the
Mhm.
coaching industry is declining because why hire a coach when I can go to AI and access, build me a plan to start a business or build me a plan
Mhm.
to lose some weight or whatever the case may be,
Yeah.
right? So I do think
Yeah.
there's a decline in people hiring actual like human coaches to support them. Um, but the difference is, some people use their lived experience to help people get through the same issues. So, for example, just picking on us, we open up about moms, right? Because I've lost my mom as a boy and have lived through it and have been able to, I don't know, go off to college, start a business, have a family, I can then say, if you're someone who lost your mom at a young age, I can coach you on how to, you
Yeah.
know, work through that pain, start your business, right? So sometimes people just draw from their lived experience to help others and to guide others along the way. So in a way, it's almost like a mentor. But then you have some people
Yeah.
who really do some good coaching work. Here's the problem I'm having, and then that coach can help come up with a strategic plan to help them work through that problem. Each week, let's lock in on this to be accountable. I'm thinking about a client of mine that I'm doing some coaching with who's been grieving a relationship over the last couple of years. So what I challenge him to do, hey, let's get out weekly.
Mhm.
Let's get two strangers, right, on a weekly basis. Let's get off the apps for a little while and have some
Yeah.
human connection, right?
But
So
the
I
baby moms,
yeah, I'm giving us some
all
actionable
of them.
things to do on a weekly basis to move him along to where his goals are. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
people have different approaches with it, but again, even with that, you can do your homework on the person. And the last thing I'll say to this, Latoya, is sometimes I think people coach the things that they haven't experienced, right? So if I'm a relationship coach and not in a relationship, come on, right? Like, because now what am I drawing? Am I drawing from the bitterness or the hurt from previous relationships and trying to coach you on
Yeah.
that? Or am I pulling from what I'm living in the moment, right? What I'm practicing in the moment. And I think
Yeah.
that's what distinguish people who are good at what they do versus people who are just space holders or just pretenders, for lack of better words. Yeah.
Yeah, I
That's
like
what I'm
that.
saying.
And I do think lived experience is very important. So again, Cheyenne Bryant, she does say she now calls herself, even though she keeps a DR in front of her name, that she's a psychology expert and life coach versus a therapist. That's what she's calling herself now. And just in fairness to what her pushback is for those who are, in disagreement with her title and how she classifies herself. She says she doesn't need to verify her credentials when she was asked during an interview. Um, she said she provided proof of her degree. She doesn't need to provide proof of a degree to Silence the Chatter. She said, although she said she has multiple degrees, and her thing is that her proof isn't something that she has to prove to individuals. Her proof is already within her credentials by her degrees. Again, she hasn't shown proof of them, but she's saying she has them. She, counseled people with Nick Cannon, like Nick Cannon and Shannon Sharp, and they've confirmed that she, is good, that she's deemed good at her work and effective, and she's effective at what she does. She has lived experiences in relationships, so she feels like she can speak to that. And so that's what she does. And she's also just said that she did actually attend counseling psychology at it's a now defunct Argosy University. It was a school. It was accredited at the time that she went to it, but later on, when she went back to get her credentials, they were closed down. She followed up and was advised that, yeah, they are closed down, but if she wanted her money back, because they couldn't provide her credentials, that her education would be wiped out. So there will be no record of her education should that come up. Or she can leave it be, not ask for a refund. And if those credentials pop up, she could still have them. And she chose to just not do a refund. So
Okay.
That was her pushback on that. And
Gotcha.
it is what it is in that situation. Let me read a chat. And also I want to give a shout out to in YouTube. Let me just go back up in the chat. At CCS Blessing 9750. I see you in the chat. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate you. Tiffany, again, is adding to the conversation. So let me just read what she has to say. She said, coaching, I believe, lives outside of the medical structure of diagnostic analysis in a Western culture. So, for example, a holistic medical coach might refer non-FDA regulated tools. She says, for me, I find spiritual coaching is fascinating outside of traditional religious practices. And I think that's a good point to make, that sometimes people aren't agreed, because we know now the FDA is not good, even though medicine is, the pharmaceuticals is a derivative of holistic things like plants, the things that are here naturally. The FDA struggles. They don't really like to approve holistic approaches to medicine, So I get she's coming from when it comes to not having that degree. And I'm not saying that's what she's saying, but not having that degree, because you can't treat people in a way that you've learned to do outside of the Western world. She says capitalism is real.
Yes. I get that. I didn't even see that comment, but yes, the almighty dollar. Yes.
Yeah. What she said.
So, yeah, because when we talk holistic, I mean, now we're moving away from the medication.
Yeah.
Again, now we got to go inward, right? And I love the spiritual coaching aspect, because we need somebody who can be a mirror, and somebody who can be a window, right? Somebody who can help us reflect, and also help us see different perspectives. So I love that, Tiffany. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and shout out to also KT Ware, who's in the chat, who's piggybacking on the conversation, saying exactly, you have to be able to discern the difference in those who train versus just opinion. You should only take advice from those who's qualified to give it. I think that's important, and that's not to take away, but separating the two, right? We're separating life coach from someone who is who calls himself a therapist, because in this case, that's what's happening in this situation when we're talking about Cheyenne Bryan. And that's not I'm not here to just dog out, especially a Black woman. I use this subject, her, what she has to say is just an example and room for discussion on, because there's a lot of people out there like her,
Yeah.
that may be causing harm. If she hasn't, there may be people that are calling themselves doctors because they think, they've done they went to YouTube University and Dr. Google and are causing harm. So I think it's important to have this discussion without dogging her out. I wish her well.
Absolutely. Because it's all about accountability at the end of the day, and we have to be accountable to ourselves and to those who we serve. And to those who trust us enough to take what we say and do something with it. Now, it's not to say that she's not good at what she do. Like I said, I never didn't know about the woman until my client made me aware. But she could have very well shared something and helped, anybody she talked to move along in their healing journey. And it may have did what it was intended to do. But if there's this facade, behind the name, I do think that's quite.
Like Dr. Sebi, right?
Yeah. But yeah, those are my thoughts. But I'm with you. I'm not here to bash anybody. But I do think it's important that we hold those who claim to especially because many people, there's still some misconceptions about mental health, right? There's still people who are resistant and very skeptical. And then there are people who are turning the corner. And it's those people who are ready to turn the corner. We don't want them to go back the other way when they can lean into a space to really get that break that they're looking for, that mental break, that emotional break that they're looking for. So yeah. But I hope she's able to figure out what she got to figure out and keep doing better for herself.
Yeah. And on the heels, as I know we'll be wrapping up shortly, and I want to get all of your questions and comments in. I had one that was posted on my IG page at In Your Ear Radio. So shout out to Jenny Poise who had this question. And thank you to all who joined me in the chat, joined us in the chat on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you so much. Tiffany says that she's shout out to both of us who are leading the conversation today. She says it's extremely powerful. So I'm just grateful that that you received that. And yes, and Africa also is saying that clinicians do not give advice; they give guidance.
Oh, Africa.
I got to marinate on that.
That's it. That's it. Yeah.
And I'm thinking about, because I remember being in sessions where it's like, well, how does that make you feel? So it's like they're guiding you through the experience. And so you're walking yourself through your emotions. And yeah,
That's it. That's it.
yeah,
That's our job. Our job
yeah,
is just to guide. And again, I use the terms mirrors and windows, right? How can I reflect back to you what I'm hearing you say, what I'm hearing, how I'm hearing you thinking, how I'm hearing your behavior is impacting you, and now can I offer a different perspective? Have you considered this? Have you considered that? What about this? Earlier you said this. Let me connect it to that, right? We just got you. I love how you put it, Latoya. We just guiding through an experience
yeah. They just,
because
before you know it, you didn't walk yourself into a door, out of a door, to another
there you go.
door. And they
Yeah,
haven't told you what to do. They just said, well, how does that make you feel? Well, what do you think you should do?
yeah,
Or have
yeah.
you thought about doing it this? You make all the decisions.
That's the end. That's it right there. That's it. And even if you don't make the decision that you think is right, whatever decision you make, the provider is there to help support you. Okay. Now what did we learn from that experience? What did we learn from that
Yeah,
decision? Right? So that we don't
yeah.
apply that in this new situation and now keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result. That's exactly it. Because I believe we have all of our answers. We have everything we need within us. We just
Do.
need somebody to bring it out, right? Angie Play. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that's the idea where kids are born with all of their genius. And as parents, I'm a parent of a going on 3-year-old. Our
You got
job
to,
is to
you don't get no sleep.
oh, yeah. That's another podcast. Help
But you
me,
didn't
help me.
mention it this time. But normally when I talk to you, it's like, yeah, I ain't get no sleep.
Well, just because he's getting better, he's getting better. But the idea is just that we come with all what we need. We just need somebody to help pull it out, and somebody to help say, hey, it's okay. Let's neutralize some of your feelings. Let's get
Okay.
into our rational thinking, right? And
Yeah.
let's really work through this. But well said. I don't want to get caught up on that because I enjoy that topic right there for sure, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. You all give us the tools. And again, I feel it when you're walking me through it, because by the time I'm off the conversation, I'm kind of like, oh, okay.
Hmm.
I figured some things out. So I'm gonna just do some rapid fire with my questions, but I want to address
Let's do
Genuine Boys, who asked a question on my IG page in your ear radio. And she says she couldn't join today, but she will be watching later. But she wanted to ask you, what is your take on taking anxiety medications, and or what your approach is to dealing with anxiety?
it. To the first part, I'm not anti-medication. I do think sometimes medication helps to give us that chemical balance in our brain. Sometimes when we talk about neurodivergence, depression, anxiety, sometimes it's a chemical imbalance, and I think
Mhm.
the medication, whether it's and I won't bore you all with the specifics, but it can stabilize some of the mood that we may be in, right? We're in a very anxious mood, high anxious mood, a very low anxious mood. It try to stabilize it so that we can function throughout the day. So I'm not anti-medication. I would say not all medication is treated equally, so one medicine, the medicine that may work for me may not work for you. So I think it's important that you talk with your psychiatrist and your primary care physician on the different brands and help them to understand your body type so that the medication that's recommended and the dosage that's recommended is applicable to it. Because sometimes you can be under dosage, you can be too high, have too high of a dosage, and it can make your situation a lot worse than what it is. Unfortunately, you kind of have to, not that you have to, but unfortunately that's a part of the experience, because you may get something that may work in one season that may not work in another season, or you may just age out, right? Your body changes, your needs changes, and you may need a lower dosage. And I'm thinking about a client who has some high anxiety, and that's been a lot of our work. Hey, here's what you're experiencing. Did you check in with your psychiatrist to let them know these are the changes and the symptoms you're experiencing that's different from what you're used to? And he go and do that, and then they make some adjustments, and we see his mood level out, and he's able to deal with things that he typically wouldn't be able to. As far as like strategies on dealing with anxiety, thinking holistically, right? Breathing is one of the best ways to disrupt anxious thoughts and anxious
I
feelings.
always say that.
That's it, and the fact that you and I can breathe the same air and be hundreds of miles away, speaks to me that we connected to a source that is way bigger than you or I combined, right?
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
you take the time to really breathe and get in control of our breathing, right? And one strategy is called box breathing, where you inhale for 4 seconds, At the top of that inhale, you hold it for 4 seconds. Then you exhale for 4 seconds. And at the bottom of that inhale, you hold it. Yeah. So it's a 4 second inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then hold it at the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can do that as a cycle, right? To really get your body to come into a calm state. It doesn't mean the things that may be causing you to be anxious would change, but your nervous system starts to regulate. 1, 2, journaling, I think, is another effective way of managing some anxiety. Sometimes we just overthink it. We just
Yeah,
overthink,
yeah,
and
yeah.
especially we worry. And sometimes we just got to get those thoughts out, get them out the way so that we can make room for some new thoughts and new perspectives. And not that we have to write it to read it again. Not that we have to write a letter to someone and give it to them, but it's just a form of release for ourselves to make room for some new thoughts and just to say, okay, I'm tripping on that. Let me get that out the way, right? So I can focus. A third thing, I think, moving the body, right? If you're someone who want to get in the gym, do some swimming, do some running, do some swift walking, I think what that does, it helps the nervous system get into regulation as well. Because if you can take your body through a stressful activity, when life stress come at you, it's like, I've been there already,
Mhm.
and not that we wouldn't have a reaction to it, but how we respond to it is differently. I'm someone who experienced a level of anxiety, but my way of managing is I push my body to a high anxious level through the form of physicality, so that
Mhm.
when stress come, I'm like, okay, I can manage this because my body has already been there before. So those are just some practical things folks can do. And I would say the final things: get in community, talk with people, right? If you don't want to
Yes.
talk with a therapist, get a group of friends that you can
Yeah.
trust, right? That can hold space, that can support you and not crap on you and ridicule you and criticize you, but validate you, see you, hear you, and be a
Yeah.
window mirror for you. Those are some great ways to help manage some of the anxiety that all of us experience in some form or fashion.
And my name is Latoya, and I support all of that. The breathing, you might get the CBD THC effects. What he just did, it relaxed me. Writing is something I do too. I'm teaching myself now not to respond to everything. People trigger me with they saying something being a little sassy. What they call it now, spicy. I've learned to
Okay,
just write out what I want to say to them and delete it
that's
and
it.
move on. And so
Yeah,
that's working for me too. And what was the other thing? Community for sure. I'm a part of a book club. Shout out to my cousin who brought this to us. Has it been 2 years now? And I look forward to it. I know once a month I have somewhere to go, and I know that I'm going to have a good time and I can be myself. And we're going to talk about the book, and probably not, but we're going to have a good time together. And so, or just going out helping people. But that community for me is the book club, and I like that a lot. Trying to get these in real quick because I know we got to get you out of here.
for
Just
sure.
real
Let's
random, kind of a risky question, but do you think pastors should have a degree to be a pastor of a church? You think they should have a degree or license, like in theology or something?
uh
You think that's
hmm,
important in teaching religion or the
that's a
Bible
good,
or the
yes.
Quran or
I
the
would say
Torah?
so. I would say so. Because again, because you go through a rigorous training, you go through, you have gatekeepers and accountability, people who can help you check your blind spots, people who can help you to see things and catch on to things that your own bias may not allow you to. So yes, I think going through that training, it helps to qualify you to speak to the theology side of things and to the practical side of things. Because I think, many people who lean into church or religious spaces, they come for a word, but they also come for some practical things that they can do in their day-to-day life. So if as a leader of a church, if you can combine the two, my biggest guess is that the congregation will walk away all the time better than how they came.
Okay. And the other question I had was, do you think serial killers can be cured? Because I think that's a mental health issue. Do you think it's a mental health issue? And can they be cured? People who are serial killers?
I don't know if there's a cure, because now we're talking sociopaths.
Yeah.
We talking individuals who lack no regard for anyone whatsoever, and a lot of times I don't know if there's a cure. I do think there's compassion. I do think there's support, and accountability. But as far as cure, I don't know if there is necessarily a cure, but I
Hmm.
do think there's other things that they can benefit from, to be accountable for the actions that they take.
Also, do you see racism as a form of mental health instability, or is that just a confirmation bias, ignorant way of being?
Well, it depends. It depends, and the reason why I say it depends, for example, and I love to debate this, like the name white supremacy, right?
Mhm.
When what is white supremacy? And we can people can define it, and is white people having been dominant over black people or been power over black people for how eons of time or whatever. Fine.
Mhm.
But do I subscribe to that ideology? No, right? Because I believe that there's only one supreme being that's over me, right? So how dare I take the admiration of a supreme being and say that there's some type of white supreme that is over me, right? And if I begin to say that to myself over and over, I can start to believe that, and I
Yeah,
think that can start to taint my to distort my mental health, right? And how
yeah,
I see
yeah.
myself, how I see the world, right? So I think we have to be mindful of what we hear and what we say and what we subscribe to, that may not even be real, because the moment I say that, Latoya, you're supreme over me, that gives you this position of power and control over me,
Mhm.
right? And if I don't believe that another human can have that type of, now it's not to say that it wasn't done, right? It was forced. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying, right? It's not to discredit what our ancestors and people have experienced and still experience to this day. But if we subscribe to these ideologies, and it starts to distort our own thinking and how we view ourselves, I think that's what causes us to have those mental health issues,
Yeah.
and sends us down a path of self destruction.
And just two quick ones. And I know these are probably would require more time, but if you can kind of shrink it. One of them is there a difference between feelings and emotions?
They're the same. They're the same. Yeah.
Okay, easy enough.
You know, yeah, our emotions, and we have hundreds of them at any moment. But a lot of times they're not real. A lot of times, they're rooted in something that happened in a prior situation from a prior experience that may come up in the moment. And a lot of times, if we behave based on our emotions, oh man, we will we will have a hard time. But I think a lot of times we're not taught, or guided through how to manage our emotions, how to check them, how to neutralize them, and shift to the rational side of our brain. Because if everything is done out of emotion, then I think we miss trying to reason and trying to logically
Mhm.
process things, and it
Yeah.
can cause a lot of harm. Yeah.
Yeah. And just last one before we get out of here, but I just want to just comment to Tiffany, who's saying free will choice is tricky. And I want to have a whole conversation about that, just centered around religion and Christianity and all of that
That is.
entails. Gonna be a little political aspect of it. So that right there, I'm gonna put a pin in that. But I hear
Come
you.
on,
I hear
Tiffany.
you.
Yeah,
That's deep.
yeah. That
Okay.
is
You
good. That
girl.
is. Yeah.
But finally, I just want to ask, I don't know if you wanted to piggyback on that, but I'm talking as fast as I can because we got a
No,
minute
you
left.
good. Yeah, yeah, you
Okay.
got it.
I just wanted to know what do you think can help people, or why do you? How am I trying to phrase this? Basically, people bring their past, their childhood experiences, or their past relationship experiences into their current situations. What can they do to stop that? How can they stop that? Because everybody is unique. You come into a new relationship, you shouldn't bring your childhood or your past or your past relationship. What is a quick way to shut that down?
Mm. I don't know if there's a quick way,
Yeah.
Latoya, but a few thoughts I'm happy to share. One, I think, I mean, in the name of therapy, just having a private space to talk about some of those things, to unpack it, to unload it, so that you're not dumping it on your new partner or someone you're pursuing. One, because trauma bonding and trauma dumping is real, and sometimes people can come in relationships and share a lot of things that they've experienced and dump it on a person. It can be like, whoa, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
lot, right? And if we're not careful, we can cause harm unintentionally, right? So I think it's important to have some private space to unpack and to work through some of your things on your own. One, two, I think, some things that people can do is, write letters of forgiveness to themselves and to others.
Mhm.
Sometimes we have to forgive those who have harmed us, who have hurt us, whether they still with us or not. And forgiveness is a gift that you give to yourself, not necessarily that you give to other people. Because if you carrying resentment, carrying hurt, carrying a grudge, that's poison that's tainting you, right? Because it got to come from, it comes from a place. And if I hate you, if I resent you, right, it starts with me. So one, I think we have to find ways of releasing, old thoughts and past and hurts that no longer serves us in today's time, right, or in this current relationship. Three, I believe that though it's not our partner's responsibilities to heal the wounds, I do think it's our partner's responsibilities to help soothe the wounds, right? Can you help soothe the pain? Can you help soothe the trauma? And I think that comes with by being curious, by validating, by affirming, by just holding the space and saying that, your lived experience and what you've experienced is real. And I'm not here to perpetuate that. I'm not here to add harm to that. But I
Yeah.
can listen, and I can love you based on who you are now. But that's my short of the long to how we can begin
Yeah.
to address that. Otherwise, we get into these trauma bonded relationships, and then we jump to marriage, and then a week later we talk about we want to get divorced because we haven't had a chance to really unpack. And then the last thing I'll add, because I'm just kind of I'm rolling right now.
I
Um,
know.
I think it's just
You got to come back. I'm sorry. I got some more questions. I'm sorry.
but but just being able to ask questions, and be curious, what I mean, and to try to understand, how experiences impacted a person and why they've impacted them the way they did, and doing it from a non-judgmental place. Because if I can understand all of what you come with, it helps me to understand you.
Yeah.
But that's all I say about that.
I appreciate you so much. So if people can still go to thinkandgrowllc.com if they want to book you, right?
Yeah. If you want to just meet, have a conversation, or just want to push back against or affirm something I said, you can certainly reach me. On there is get in contact or something on my website. I'm sorry, I can't remember off top, but I do get the information, and I'll be glad to follow up with whomever may want some support, want to tap in.
That's thinkandgrowllc.com. And again, I want to thank all of you for watching and chatting and engaging us today. I appreciate you so much. So let me just say that. And this is my applause to you, Mr. Williams, and to those in the chat and those who are watching later. I appreciate you so much. Let me just get my applause in. That crowd, they was loud, they was roaring, they was roaring. Okay, we're gonna get up out of here again. You guys, love and respect. Do you have anything you want to say before we close out?
How you think about yourself is what matters the most. How you view yourself is what matters the most. So how you perceive you, right? Whether it's good or bad, the one you feed is the one that will win. So think about what's lovely. Think about what's peaceful. Think about what's great about you, and feed that, because the world, I think, would often cause us to believe something different about ourselves. So that's what I'll end with today, Latoya. Thank you for having me again.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you all.
Peace.
Peace.